When I wake, you 24. Before my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, it's a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kids, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war. Let's tell the squad to squad up. Let's uplift and lift God up. He laid down his life and got up. Rather we wins or lose, they not us. Can't tie us down or hold us back. Bible blicky, we holy strap. It's a war and we on attack. On point like we on Look, he filling the blanks when I'm feeling so blank. When I sit and I think and I drain on my thoughts like I swim in a tank. And God's on me and I'm pulling my rank. Don't tell me I can't. Like a man with a tank, bro, I'm ready for the war. Don't stepping like Morse code. One day he gon' come knock at the door, so better get hit like a torso. When I wake, you 24. Before my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, it's a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kids, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
Yeah, it's a war. Gotta cut the tie, you feel a pull. Bible say the fleet, let's keep it dead. Elevator, don't work, take the stairs. Gotta watch the world and do the most. I'm just as radical in my approach. You can ask the kids, we checking phones. Nah, don't unlock it, what's the code? I was once timid, now I'm bold. Bought my father business, I don't troll. Time to spread the G, I'm on go. Let her force it back and watch him grow. In the blood, I'm covered head to toe. Sacrifices made to save a soul. Trying to pack the kingdom, that's the goal. Down and be the lamb, not the goat.
When I wake, you 24. Before my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, it's a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kids, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
Fighting with a masquerade, war. The devil I eradicate. I'm a soldier for the Lord above. And for him, I'm a basket case. It's not the show, I got the sword on me. Time to lock and load, I brought a whole army. That's squad control, we about to shift gears. Bring the Lord near, no more fear. War. And with a Bible verse, I could replace a curse and make a demon hurt. They gon' need a hearse, and I'ma need a shovel to put him in the dirt. And that's the way it works. War. Meeting with the Lord, that's one day. Gotta read more than Sunday. Rather be a victim of the faith than the face of disgrace of me making a mistake.
When I wake, you 24. Before my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, it's a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kids, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stelman Smith Jr., and this is The Unapologetic Apologist. And as you can already see, joining me today is the great, you know him, you love him, author of The Lazy Approach to Evangelism, Eric Hernandez. How you doing, brother?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So yeah, we got some stuff to get to that we were discussing beforehand. Sometimes God smiles on you, and other times he frowns on you, and we have to listen to content like this to make our response videos. But before there, if you guys go to the link in the description, we are also streaming right now on Rumble. The second half of the show will be exclusively on Rumble. We're going to get to more there, so click the link in the description if you want to go over there. Also, Eric Hernandez's channel, just click on the title. He's tagged in it. Go subscribe to his channel. Although I kind of more so need him to give me some of his followers because, yeah, he's doing a lot better than me. But anyway, Matt Dillahunty responding to Eric, thinking that he owned Eric. We got to get into this. But Eric, first, we want to actually help some people out who may be newer to this topic. So maybe give us kind of an introduction to this whole Ian thing. Who is Ian? What does he have to do with determinism? I don't know.
Yeah. So it's one of my favorite arguments to use. It's called the evolutionary argument against naturalism. And I kind of provide my own variation of it, though it's similar to Plantinga's, and I add something at the end to it. But to start with the first part, and there's multi levels to the argument, so to speak. But to give it in a kind of easy to kind of follow form, I like to start with a thought experiment. Suppose one day you wake up from a nap and you look at the microwave to see what time it is. And you see that the microwave says 12 o'clock. So you form the belief it is 12 o'clock. Well, now suppose you realize that it's actually really hot in your house, and then you look at your refrigerator and you see that there's water under it, and then you come to the realization that the power went out, and you look back at the microwave and it's actually blinking 12 o'clock. Now, here's a question. Is it 12 o'clock? Well, the answer is really you don't know. It could be 12 o'clock. As they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. It could be 12 o'clock. But the problem is that given the power went out, you now have what we call in philosophy an undercutting defeater for any belief that you have about the time if it's based on the reading of the microwave. Why? Because you now know that the microwave is no longer a reliable mechanism to give you the truth of what time it is.
Mhm.
That being said, a similar, if not the same problem arises when it comes to naturalism and evolution, when you combine these two. In a nutshell, we can think of it this way. And Dillahunty has a clip where he kind of has me explain it in a short version, but essentially, it's that if there is no God, let's suppose there is no God, there's two options, right? There's God exists, God does not exist. If you take the God does not exist option, and as Plantinga formulates it, you look at, well, naturalism is the only game in town. And the way he defines it as nothing like God or spirits or anything like God exist. And it's as Dillahunty points out, it's a metaphysical naturalism. Only the physical world exists. Well,
Sure.
The only way to explain our existence would be Darwinian evolution via natural selection. Fair enough. But here's where you begin to get an epistemic argument for an undercutting defeater. And here's what that means. If you look at the way our beliefs form, and if everything's physical, then it's going to be produced by certain neurological patterns and brain firings. And just like everything else about us physically that is explained through evolution and natural selection, you're going to see that it's all going to aim for survival value and not necessarily truth value. Put differently, if there's no God, then it should be obvious to say that your brain was not designed to obtain truth because it wasn't designed for anything. There is no designer to begin with. Now, as a side note, I'm not a naturalist. I'm a substance dualist. I believe there's a soul. So I don't think your brain is what, quote unquote, forms a beliefs. There's a correlation. Don't want to get into that. But if we're doing an internal critique from an atheistic worldview as defined as there is no God, well, then just like your nails, your hands, your teeth is all aimed at survival, that would equally apply to your brain and the beliefs it produces. So it's not designed to obtain truth, and it's aimed at survival value, not truth value. In other words, natural selection doesn't, quote unquote, care whether or not your beliefs are true. What it's really looking at is what those brain patterns do, what they produce in you, and the behavior that it produces in you. All that to say, false beliefs can produce adaptive behavior. And to personify evolution and natural selection, it would, imagine, if you will, it's looking at the beliefs that you have, and not necessarily even the beliefs. That's not really relevant, but rather the behavior those beliefs produce. And if the behavior these beliefs are producing aid in survival, well, that's going to be passed on because that's what's going to help the species survive. So the illustration that I use, and this is just one part of this case, which Dillahunty spends all the time just focusing on the illustration. The illustration is simply meant to show, to concede that, yes, false beliefs can produce a survival value and adaptive behavior. So consider two situations. First, let's say there's a car coming towards me, and I have the belief that if it hits me, I'm going to die. So in order to survive, I must jump out of the way of the car. So I jump out of the way of the car, and that belief produced adaptive behavior that helped me survive. So natural selection says, yep, check, so to speak. Let's pass that belief on because it grants or produces behavior that aids in survivability. But consider the same scenario, but with a different set of beliefs. Suppose a car's coming towards me, and I form the belief that, or I have the belief rather, that I'm Superman, and it actually won't do a thing to me if it hit me. However, because I want to protect my identity as Clark Kent, I'm going to jump out of the way of the car to appear human. And so that belief produces the same behavior. I jump out of the way and I survive. And no, even though my beliefs were false, it still granted or produced, gave me behavior that helped me adapt and survive. So in the same way, doesn't matter if they're true or not, false beliefs can equally produce adaptive behavior and survivability. So again, natural selection is going to aim at survival value, not necessarily truth value. That being said, just like the microwave illustration, what this does is you now have an undercutting defeater for any belief your brain produces. Why? Because recall the microwave illustration. Well, the power went out, so it affects what the microwave says. I can't trust it. It could be true. So the argument is not that, and note, I haven't even brought up God here in the argument. God's not, you don't need God to make the argument. Dillahunty later will say, well, how does God solve this? Well,
it's an internal critique. It doesn't matter if God solves it or not.
Exactly. There's no God problem here. It's an internal critique with naturalism and evolution. And so the argument is, if this is how we came about, well, just like the microwave, you now have a reason to not trust the beliefs your brain produces. It's what you call in philosophy an undercutting defeater. So that's going to apply to any belief your brain produces, including the belief there's no God, or including the belief naturalism, natural selection and evolution are true. Naturalism and evolution are true. So that's the gist of the argument. And now what I add to the argument, he doesn't really get into this, but what I add is that with this undercutting defeater, it's going to remove any ability to rationally affirm things, to justify something, to justify a belief that a belief is true. And if the requirement for knowledge is to, at minimum, have a justified true belief, you can think of knowledge like ingredients in a cake. You need all three ingredients at minimum to have the cake. And if you're missing one, you don't have a cake. Well, for knowledge, it's typically hashed out as a justified true belief, JTB. Well, if this undercutting defeater removes that justification aspect of knowledge, well, then your beliefs, whether true or not, even if they are true, cannot be considered knowledge. They cannot rise to the level of knowledge because they cannot be rationally justified. So then what I add is that, well, then therefore you can't have knowledge if there's no God. If naturalism and evolution are true, and you can't have a justification for the truth of your beliefs, you can't have knowledge. Now note,
Right.
just as stated there, if someone points to something and says, but look, I have knowledge here. Well, note they're only running into the argument, because if the argument is, to simplify, if there is no God, then you cannot have knowledge. I do have knowledge, therefore there is a God. Now that's how one could make that an argument for God, but that moves further than what Plantinga's argument moves. But in the argument that we just described, it is simply that given naturalism and evolution, when you combine those, you have an undercutting defeater for trusting in the rational reliability of your cognitive faculties. For simplicity, let's say brain. You have an undercutting defeater for trusting any belief your brain produces. And again, that includes a belief there's no God. That includes a belief that your beliefs are justified, and includes a belief that you're rational. And so you have this undercutting defeater. I don't think there's a way to escape the argument. We're going to see that Dillahunty is going to give it a shot. I think he actually doesn't even really get into the argument. He just focuses on the illustration.
Exactly. And as Braxton Hunter would say, it's like attacking the analogy instead of the point of the analogy. Real quick, a couple brief things.
He got that from me, but yeah, he says that too.
Oh, okay. That's actually all of these famous like guys who have doctorates and things. It's like, it turns out they got everything from Eric Hernandez. Even Leighton Flowers does that all the time. I love it. So just for people who may be newer to this out there, this stuff I know can get very complicated very quick. Again, get this book. This is really beginner level friendly. I've been reading through it. It's great. It's a great introduction to a lot of these things. So one thing, a refutation of your whole argument actually falls apart right here, because you said a broken clock is right twice a day. Not if it's telling military time, then it's only right once a day. So at least that's a defeater that's at the level of Dillahunty's type of responses. Secondly, more seriously, when we talk about naturalism, I know there are a lot of atheists who like to gripe. It's like, well, not all naturalists are the same. Some are materialists. Some, believe in Platonic forms and abstract objects. They're different things. That's why I kind of like, and I'll get more into this later when I offer my own critiques of the evolutionary argument against naturalism. But I think Josh Rasmussen kind of gives a nice framework where you can look at it rather as a dichotomy of you either have mind at the foundation of reality or mindlessness at the foundation of reality. And so I think atheism at least would have to encompass all of that mindlessness. So whether you want to call it naturalism, materialism, Platonism, it doesn't matter, because your point is still going to go through, because the point is that without a mind, you don't have the resources to get things like rational faculties or freedom of the will, which it's going to be a big one. So the resource problem, it's still the same problem, however you want to define your ontology as an atheist. But is there anything? Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to say, and I think you kind of already addressed this because you pointed out having an undercutter for your beliefs. But if the issue is like if the microwave, if it could really be 12 o'clock, then it's not so much a problem with the belief; it's rather a problem with the justification of the belief. Is that kind of what you outlined at the end there?
Yeah, you cannot rationally justify it. So yeah, even if it is 12 o'clock, the fact that the microwave is affected by the power, it removes your justification for believing it is 12 o'clock. You could still believe it, but you cannot claim it's rationally justified on the reading of the microwave. Another quick like analogy, if you will, that I like to kind of point out for this is like if I take a magic 8 ball and shake it and ask it, will it rain today? And I give it a shake and it says yes. Does using the magic 8 ball to know whether or not it's going to rain, to tell the weather, is that a rational way to justify my belief that it will rain? Well, no. But no, that doesn't mean it's not going to rain. It just shows that you don't have a mechanism that is designed to tell the weather. So you're using it for something that wasn't intended to be used. Now, it gets worse with atheism. I like to say on naturalism, it's just your brain is a glorified magic 8 ball. And there's really no difference except for the fact that even if atheism were true, at least the magic 8 ball is designed, right? Where your brain still would not be designed. But again, I'm not going to use a magic 8 ball to predict the weather because it's not meant for that on atheism. It's not meant for anything at all. Your brain there's no intention behind it because intentionality implies a mind and a design behind the reason for which you have a brain to begin with.
Yeah. And I have my own critiques of that, but I'll save them for later. And without further ado, we will get into the first clip you have here of Dillahunty. Let's see if which view will be, this view will work. Nope, because that's only me. We need both of us. There we go. All right. Just tell me when to stop.
Introduction to what the evolutionary argument against naturalism is. And in a nutshell, it is the notion that evolution by means of natural selection can't or isn't likely to produce reasonable faculties and a path to truth, and therefore those two on their own can't do it. Matter of fact, Plantinga's argument essentially is
right here already. I think he's mischaracterizing it. Now he did kind of correct himself a little, but he says the notion of evolution by means of natural selection can't or isn't likely to produce. Now I appreciate that he maybe corrected himself because it's not that it can't produce reliable cognitive faculties necessarily, but rather what is a probability of it doing that? Because if you're looking at the origin story of how it came about on naturalism and evolution, if there's no God, that's how you explain it. Well, what's the likelihood of it producing reliable cognitive faculties? To use a microwave illustration, it would be like asking, what are the odds that the microwave is giving me the right time, given that the power just went out? Well, I don't know, 1 in 12, so to speak, if it's, just a 1 through 12 clock. But the simple point being is it's no longer something that you can use reliably to tell the time. So it's not, now he says produce reasonable faculties. I'm not sure where he gets that worded, that verbiage from. But Plantinga's asking whether or not it's probable that evolution under naturalism produces reliable, cognitive faculties. So is it a reliable source for truth? That's the question being asked. So already he's kind of mischaracterizing it. He goes on to explain Plantinga. But yeah, and then we can jump to the next one where he now kind of starts to try to respond to it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Natural selection is a thing that can care. What we're essentially saying is that natural selection doesn't necessarily select for truth. That's what their claim is. And my response initially is, doesn't it? Because reliable faculties definitely aid in survival. Okay. And that includes the ability to reason about.
Right, but he's just begging the very question. The question is, can evolution produce reliable faculties?
Yeah. Do we have reason to think that it does? So the way he responds is like, well, doesn't it? Well, that's what we're asking, right? Now, note the very next thing he says is reliable faculties definitely aid in survival. Note how that's irrelevant to the argument. The argument is not that if the evolutionary argument, EAAN, evolutionary argument against naturalism, it's not that you cannot have true beliefs. It's not that true beliefs don't aid in survival. To reiterate, it's simply that given the story of how we came about, you have an undercutting defeater for any belief your brain produces, because the goal, there is no goal. First of all, there's no intention, there's no design, there's no teleology. The end goal is not to obtain true beliefs. So whether or not they aid in survival, whether or not true beliefs aid in survival is not relevant to the fact that you don't need true beliefs to aid in survival and adaptive behavior. That's the point of the argument. So doesn't it? Well, here's what atheist philosopher of science, Patricia Churchland, says, that evolution primarily cares about 4 F's. And this is how she words it: fighting, fleeing, feeding, and reproducing, is what she says in her book. And then she says truth, whatever that is. Well, that's what she does. It's pretty funny. Philosophers can have a sense of humor sometimes. And she says truth, whatever that is, takes the hindmost. In other words, whatever truth is takes a backseat, because that's not necessarily relevant for the 4 F's: fighting, fleeing, feeding, and reproducing. As long as whatever you do, your behavior, natural selection is going to aim for things that are going to aid in that, and truth takes a backseat. And again, this is not me saying that. This is a philosopher of science, evolutionary science in particular, Patricia Churchland, saying this. So now let's look at how he kind of starts to get into it in this next clip.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I quick enough.
Evolution by natural selection is selecting for survivability. That doesn't necessarily tell you anything at all about whether your beliefs are true or not. And
So
Eric's going to do what many apologists.
Note right here, and then we can finish the clip in a little bit. Note right here, he just conceded what the argument states. Thus far, yes, that's exactly the argument. That if natural selection is aiming for survivability, doesn't tell you whether or not your beliefs are true. At best, it's told you that these beliefs have helped you survive. If he grants that, well, then, okay, then you're agreeing with me, right? And so I don't know where. It's a little odd, because it's like, well, where's the response or the rebuttal? If all he's claiming is, but true beliefs help us or aid in survival as well, we can touch on that a little bit more later. But the argument is not that if naturalism and evolution are true, you cannot have true beliefs. Again, it's simply that your beliefs don't have to be true. All right, now if you play the next clip, you'll see that now he's going to accuse me of this is where he focuses on the illustration, basically.
Just do when they simplify these things, and he's going to give like examples that ultimately fail, because when we simplify this stuff, we tend to overlook the very things that we're dependent upon.
Okay.
And what we're
So he's saying that I'm going to simplify things and use give an example that ultimately fails. And if you want, you can already jump to 757. He's going to address my Superman illustration that I already gave. But note, my illustration is not a simplification of anything. It's simply to make the point, to get the person thinking and acknowledging that, yes, false beliefs can aid in survival. So it's not a simplification. It's the exact illustration that illustrates the point that he just agreed with earlier, that if natural selection is aiming for survivability, it doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not your beliefs are true. And then he's basically going to concede the point after he gives it. So yeah, and that next one is just like a few seconds.
Right. Natural selection doesn't care whether or not your beliefs are true, because it doesn't care about anything. No, I said we were going to set aside the anthropomorphic thing. So, here's the problem.
Right there. He just agreed with the illustration. It's not a simplification. It's not failing, because it's not trying to, the Superman illustration isn't the argument. It's just to aid the person again in helping to see that, yeah, natural selection doesn't care as long as your beliefs produce adaptive behavior and survivability. He just conceded it. So I don't know why he complains about the illustration or says that it fails or say that it's a simplification. And I don't know if you have any thoughts, but then this next clip is where he's going to kind of actually get into an argument of some sort.
No, just for those who listen to Dillahunty and think he's convincing, I was very grateful that you pulled a lot of these timestamps, because I listened to the entire half hour and I was like, he just kind of prattles the whole time. Like, he makes assertions, doesn't give any arguments, and then just prattles about like making these complaints. So it sounds like, oh, I'm disagreeing, but then as you're pointing out, it's like kind of just conceding it as he goes. So
yeah.
Here's the problem. Eric talks about, how, natural selection selects for things like nails, teeth, and hands, but then he shifts focus to behaviors because that's what we're really talking about. So our natural selection didn't design or hone our senses or our faculties necessarily for identifying truth, but they were honed to allow for survivability. Those things that permit survivability or encourage survivability are more likely to get through, whereas those that inhibit it are less likely to get through. But even if it wasn't designed for truth detection, that doesn't mean it isn't reliable and good as a detector of truth. So there's the first problem right there, that because X wasn't designed to do this, that means it's bad at it? No, it just means that you don't have a reason to think it's good at it, except that we do have a very good reason to think it's good at it.
You could pause
Constant
it right
demonstration, not just observation.
Is he going to give an argument for that? Or is he just going to assert it? That's what I want to know.
He's interesting you say that. So I guess we'll have to listen, but I think he just asserts it or misunderstands the argument in what he's trying to argue for. But I want you to note a few things here. First, he kind of accuses me of switching focuses. No, the true beliefs are the beliefs, whether they're true or not, are going to be what produces the adaptive behavior, which is going to grant or not grant survivability. So it's all interconnected. There's no switching here. And again, note how he's basically agreeing. So people can rewind and listen to the kind of short version of the argument that I gave and see if anything he just said disagrees with what I said in the beginning. It doesn't. That's what's odd.
Right.
There's no disagreement unless he's assuming something that I haven't argued. But as of right now, there's nothing to disagree with. Now, here's where I think he's mischaracterizing me, whether intentionally or not. He says that that the first problem, he says that because X wasn't designed to do something, that doesn't mean it's bad at it. Well, right, I didn't say it was. I didn't say because our cognitive faculties or our brain wasn't designed to obtain truth, therefore it's bad at it. Again, and I can't say this enough, and it's going to feel like I'm beating a dead horse. It's simply the point that your beliefs don't have to be true. Not that it's therefore bad at obtaining truth. Not that therefore it has more truth on this side, less on this side. It's simply that it's an undercutting defeater. It can no longer be used as a reliable mechanism to obtain truth. There's an interesting, speaking of Magic 8 Ball, Andrew Moon wrote a paper, I think it's called like Global Debunking Arguments or something like that. And he references another philosopher that uses a different illustration with the Magic 8 Ball. He says, suppose you ask a Magic 8 Ball, are you reliable? And it says no. But what do you do with that? Right? It now just undercut itself in whether or not it's reliable. Now, note, it could still probably get some things right in the future, but you already, like that right there, if it tells you no after asking is it a reliable mechanism, then it's already undercut itself. Now, you're now going to be suspicious of everything else it says from then on out. Let's say you've never encountered a Magic 8 Ball, but that's the first question you ask. Well, now you have some kind of defeater, an undercutting defeater for trusting its reliability because it just told you not to. Now you could say, well, if we can't trust in its reliability, then shouldn't we not trust the answer when it says no? Well, that's kind of the loop, the stalemate that you get into. Well, should I trust it or not? Well, it said no. If I trust that, then it's reliable. But then again, if it's true and what it said, well, then it's actually not reliable, because if it tells me it's not reliable and that's true, well, then it's not reliable. Then you kind of get into this like a debilitating loop, not knowing what to do with it. But that's kind of the point. So far, that's all I've argued. And again, I didn't say, well, because it wasn't designed for it, therefore it's bad at it. And I like what you said. Is he going to give an argument for it? Well, he's going to take a swing at it, and let's see what he says.
Or should I not have skipped ahead? Should I have continued that?
No. I think that's, well, let's see. It's up to you, because I don't remember what's in between. What I have next is the 13-minute, 49-second mark.
I can go back a little bit to the 8-minute mark. I was just thinking, like, so far, and again, we're obviously jumping around, and I've sped it up so we can spend less time listening to him and suffering. But like, people can go watch the whole thing in context. Like, as far as I can tell, like, the only arguments he makes are Eric bad, Eric oversimplify, Eric move from things like fingernails to behaviors. Like, it's just complaints about you the whole time. Like, there's not anything.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But to be fair, I jumped back, so we might hear a little bit of overlap from what we just heard, but just again, to be as fair as possible, I want to see if he gives some justification for what he says.
Our natural selection didn't design or hone our senses or our faculties necessarily for identifying truth, but they were honed to allow for survivability. Those things that permit survivability or encourage survivability are more likely to get through, whereas those who that inhibit it are less likely to get through. But even if it wasn't designed for truth detection, that doesn't mean it isn't reliable and good as a detector of truth.
Good. Now
So
provide
there's
the
the first
argument.
problem right there, that because X wasn't designed to do this, that means it's bad at it. No, it just means that you don't have a reason to think it's good at it. Except that we do have a very good reason to think it's good at it.
It's the
Constant
reason.
demonstration, not just of survivability, but of accuracy in independent trials. This is the reason why we rely on things like scientific method and not just hunches, not just, ooh, you came up with an interesting story. Because he notes that if false beliefs can bring about adaptive behavior, and here he's shifted from reliable faculties or true beliefs or survival to false beliefs can inform adaptive behavior. And so his example is, a car is coming. I am human.
You can pause it
jump or I'll
here
die.
because
I feel like this
goes
might
over-
be after you say this. I feel like this might be a good time to bring in the clip from you responding to Godless Granny, because that's
Sure.
his justification is, oh, but we can demonstrate it. We can we can get verification through science and these kinds of things. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So note how he's kind of, again, intentionally or not, he's kind of bait and switched the point of my argument, or at least the argument as I present it, because he says, well, just because it wasn't designed for this doesn't mean it's bad at it, and that something like we don't have reason to trust or something like that. No, that doesn't mean that we can't have reasons to think it is good at it. Well, my argument is not that. My argument is, no, given the story, given what I've explained, given that it's not designed to obtain truth, given that its aim is survival, not truth, well, we now have a positive reason to not trust it. So a microwave, all things being equal, yeah, we can trust it. But once the power goes out, we now have a reason to not trust it. It undercuts it. Again, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's false. It means we now have something that removes that justification for trusting that it is a reliable mechanism for whatever it's intended to do. For the microwave, it's for telling time. For your brain, that's any belief. That's any belief you have. So I actually make the stronger claim, not that, well, that doesn't mean we can't trust it. No, I'm saying we actually have a positive reason to now say, well, I now have a reason to not trust it, to not trust it's reliable for obtaining truth. I mean, again, literally, it was not designed to obtain truth because there's no designer. So we know at least that. And then on top of that, what its aim is survival, not truth. Go back to the Magic 8 Ball. The aim of it is not for truth, but for entertainment. So if I know the aim of something, then I now have a reason to not trust it when it comes to other things. He's trying to argue, well, that doesn't mean it can't be used for that or it can't be good for that. Well, I'd like to hear an argument. And basically what he's said and what he's going to say and what he repeats is, well, no, look at how trustworthy it is. But what this actually does is it's begging the question in circular. He's essentially saying, and there's another clip that I have where I'll give the spoiler here. He actually already concedes the very problem with the position. Years ago, when I asked him a question when he debated Matt Slick, he's basically saying this: I can trust my brain because my brain tells me I can trust it. Well, that's viciously circular, right? Because he's saying, well, the dispute under question is, are our cognitive faculties reliable? And what does he do? He says, well, look how reliable our cognitive faculties have been. Well, that just begs a question. You cannot use everything in question. So, actually go ahead and play the Godless Granny clip, because he's going to make what he says and what he says throughout the video. It's similar to what I had a discussion with Godless Granny. I used the same argument, and I did like an 1.5-hour review of that. If people want to go a lot deeper into this, I would highly recommend that they check out this video where I broke down my discussion with her, and I go through all her misconceptions of the argument. And I think Dillahunty is throwing out a response that, similar to hers, where basically it's like, well, if the microwave can't be trusted, well, maybe I should go verify it with something else. And let's say I run to my bedroom and I look at the alarm clock and I say, oh, it says 12 o'clock too, so it must be correct. The problem, of course, is that alarm clock would equally be plugged into the power and thus equally affected by the power outage, has the same problem as a microwave.
Yeah.
So going back to the illustration, what she just said would be analogous to this. But if we can look at multiple alarm clocks that all tell us it is 12 o'clock, well, then this makes the original alarm clock, which, mind you, already had an undercurrent defeater because it was plugged into power. But now that we have a lot more alarm clocks that somehow gives us reason to believe that the conclusion is actually now reliable because we now have multiple sources of alarm clocks. But you can already see the problem here. All these alarm clocks will still have to be plugged into the power. And here's how this would be now analogous to the argument. She's essentially saying, well, sure, if my brain, given Darwinian evolution via natural selection and everything else that I talked about that gave it this undercurrent defeater, you can go back and watch it. Even though my brain has this undercurrent defeater, well, then all I have to do is go talk to other brains. But again, just like the alarm clock, you're still talking to brains that came about by the same process, and thus these brains would too have an undercurrent defeater. So having multiple brains that all have the same undercutting defeater does not help this single brain that we have already established has the undercutting defeater to begin with. Once again, the solution doesn't work. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead. What do you think?
No, that's brilliant. I mean, this came up when I had Braxton Hunter on a couple years ago when I played the Atheist, and we were going through clips of. It's funny, we used clips of Matt Dillahunty, and he was talking about the calculator. Because, not to jump too far ahead, but the issue for me is determinism, right? Not even the survivability versus truth thing. It's the determinism that's the issue. And so I think what you're pointing out here is right. Is if determinism undermines our justification for our beliefs, then it doesn't matter how many sources you go to if they're all equally determined. Then all of the sources of quote unquote verification, they're all undermined. Period.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you mentioned that because it's. The argument can be used, more than one way to skin a cat. The argument can be used in different ways, including like if we focus on physicalism, right? Because if all your beliefs are determined, you kind of get to the same problem in principle. But you might have now some naturalists that say, well, there are some naturalists that hold to property dualism. I don't think it's a form of naturalism, but they argue that it is. I don't want to get into that. But the point is, they'll say, well, no, I do have something immaterial. My mind is immaterial. But the problem is, if that's the case, and all it does is push back the goalpost, because now you get into what's called epiphenomenalism, where sure, your brain produces these immaterial mental states, but they don't do anything. There is no top-down causation. It's all bottom-up. So your brain produces a belief, but that belief doesn't cause anything. It's the neurological patterns in your brain that produce a belief, but then also produce and are determine the bodily actions. So the belief's almost irrelevant. It just kind of floats on top of the physical mechanism. So however way you want to cut it, whether it's determinism or you're just focusing epistemically, as Plantinga does, or you want to focus deterministically, where now you get into a problem of the mechanism behind determinism, right? There's not going to be a way that you're going to be able to justify the truth of your beliefs. And in fact, the next clip, I think, segues perfectly into that, and how he starts talking about what we have to do to know whether or not our beliefs are true.
Yeah, and this is relevant too, because you were given the example of the Magic 8 Ball. I ask it, is it reliable? It says no. Here's the thing: even if it says yes, if I ask on the Magic 8 Ball, hey, will you produce reliable, true beliefs? If I ask you a question, it says yes. But then that might not be self-defeating, but if we understand the mechanism by which it comes to the answer, it's still undermined. We still wouldn't trust it. So, yeah. So we'll bring this back in.
And before you play it, so ask yourself, because there's like a few more we have that these are relatively short clips. I want the listener to ask himself, is he making an argument, or is he just asserting, well, my faculties are reliable because, look, they're reliable? Is he making an argument? And is what he's saying even relevant, or is it a mischaracterization of the argument I've made? All right.
Yeah.
Through the testing, you believe you're seeing a car. You believe the car is moving. You think you know roughly how much this car weighs, the rate of speed it's traveling, all these factors about what's likely to happen if it impacts a human. That's not just a belief, car coming must move. It is a network, a net of beliefs, the overwhelming majority of which are accurate enough to allow you to make reasonable decisions about the reality that you're experiencing.
Okay.
And we continually.
So he says, well, he accuses me of focusing on just one belief, and he does concede, okay, yeah, this is a false belief that produced this behavior, but you ignored all the other beliefs that were in there that were true. You know, the fact that a car is going fast, that a car is coming towards you, that a car can cause damage to a human, and both in both scenarios, whether the person believes they're Superman or believes they're just human, in both scenarios they have a set of true beliefs that help them. But again, that misses a point. The argument is not you cannot have any true beliefs. The argument is that all your beliefs is not that all your beliefs will be false. The argument is that your false beliefs can produce adaptive behavior. Now, what he's going to get to later, because he's going to kind of take a side note, but he'll later come back and we'll pull up the clip where he basically now is like, well, all we have to do is like learn to pull out the false beliefs that we have in our net of beliefs. But that begs a question that you can step outside of either, whether it be your determinism or remove the undercutting defeater for your beliefs in order to know which of those are false. But I'll save more comment on that when we get there. But did you want to say something on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're already going to go into it later, I won't say too much about it. And this is kind of what I highlighted. I forget if it was last week or the week prior, where I reviewed another debate you had along these same lines. And the point was that, yeah, they just kind of assume the truth of their position without arguing for it. Again, they treat it as what you're arguing is that beliefs just randomly pop into our head, and they go, no, but look, we reason about things, and we rationalize about things, we think through things, and we make logical deductions. It's like, yeah, but all of that is as equally determined as the belief that is the end result of it, right? So you can't just assume that because you're doing all of these things that now justifies it, because all of it was equally determined.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
All of this was really about, do we have reason to trust our senses? Do we? I know that the evolutionary argument against naturalism isn't, can we trust our senses? It's, can we trust our reasoning faculties? But these things go hand in hand. Do we have reason to trust our senses? What is the foundation of our senses? What is the foundation of reason? What is the foundation of logic? What's the foundation of math? What's the foundation of morality? Ooh, what makes something reasonable? What grounds truth? Who says it needs grounding? What does that even mean? I'm getting ready to do another video for next week on a response to a caller who called in to ask this very question about, in a world without a God, how do you account for the reliability of mathematics? So we're going to talk about grounding there. But justification doesn't require certainty. And in fact, certainty may not be possible.
Yeah.
Rational,
okay.
Reliable.
So I would recommend people to go, I'll point back to my video with Godless Granny where I was like breaking down our discussion, because she said something similar. Well, we don't need to be certain. Well, right. I'm not arguing for certainty. The argument is relatively simple. You have an undercutting defeater for any belief your brain produces, given naturalism and evolution, via natural selection. That's it. It's not about, well, therefore we can't be certain. And if you're not certain, you can't have true beliefs or you can't be justified. None of that is relevant. And what bothers me about the way he tries to respond many times is it's like maybe incredulity, where he's like, so note how he went on a little tangent of seemingly what apologists like to try and do. Well, what's a grounding for truth? What's a grounding for logic? What's this? Then he's like, well, who says it needs a grounding? Right? As if like, oh, we can just hand wave dismiss these questions. Now, one, I didn't go into any of those questions. Those weren't questions I brought up, and maybe he wasn't talking about me. That's fine. But it's like, yeah, it's just like, let me kind of what he did earlier. This argument says our faculties aren't reliable, but aren't they? Well, asking a question like that doesn't really give me an answer. It's just like, I don't know. It seems like he's trying to say, well, look this argument or these questions are asking is silly because look how silly these other questions are as well. That's not an argument. That you're not even really taking a position. You're just kind of pointing to, hey, don't you agree with me, guys that are listening? Don't you agree with this? Don't you agree with that? That's not an argument. That's not a response. It's not a rebuttal. It's not a refutation.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously the context of what we're doing right here is a response video, right? But like if you were, and this is important for as far as I try to teach people rhetoric on this channel and how to debate, like, and that's why I always recommend people go watch your debates because you're brilliant at this. If you were actually sitting across from him and he was saying all of this, so far, it doesn't even seem like you would need to provide a refutation at this point. You would just have to say, what's your argument for that? Like, give me some justification. You can't just assert that that's true and think that holds sway with anybody.
And in this, while you pull up that clip, in this, 30-something minute video that he made, the only argument, for lack of a better phrase, that I could see is what we already went over earlier, where he's basically like, well, look, we have the scientific method. Look, we have demonstrably reliable beliefs. Those are really just a connection of assertions put together without argumentation. Connecting assertions together doesn't necessarily make an argument. You're just asserting they're reliable. And then at the stick around those who are listening, because at the end we'll save that clip where I asked him that question, and we'll show it at the end to kind of show he's already answered this. He's already answered the argument because I asked him about it years ago during a Q&A. But for now, so far, I haven't heard an argument, and what he seems to do for the rest of the video is just reassert something that he's already asserted, but he's just now making the assertions in bite-sized pieces as opposed to a number of assertions together that I guess he hopes or thinks creates an argument. So in this next one here, here's where I think he just, well, first he goes to God. Let's just play it. He's gonna bring up God, but again, remember I said earlier, God was not part of my argumentation for this. It's an internal.
Yeah, and these next two timestamps were really close, so I'm just going to continue on from where we left off.
Awesome.
Cognitive faculties can exist in the absence of certainty. And the fact that we know that they can be reliable and we can investigate to tell which are more reliable or less reliable, that's the path to understanding and approaching truth. Science doesn't make truth claims. It builds probabilistic models that are the best available. Science does that through testing, independent confirmation, verification, repeated trials, concept of falsifiability, et cetera. And science understands that there are anomalies and outliers. Every problem that Hernandez and others pretend exist remains unresolved, even if you appeal to a God. So the problem that they're saying is, evolution in a purely naturalistic world doesn't give you any confidence that your reasoning faculties are reliable. Oh no, I completely disagree. I think that those can and do and demonstrably have shown the path to reliability, just not the path to certainty or capital T truth in every instance. But the fact that the system isn't pure and 100% correct.
Right here.
Yeah, that's so frustrating to me. Real quick before you go, that appeal to science is always so frustrating to me because he's speaking of science as though, oh, science, that's the thing, that's the force outside of us that tells us what we're determined to believe is true or not. No, the science is done by persons, right? Like it's interpreted by persons. Anything you're claiming science says is actually done through our senses and through our reasoning. And if that's undermined, then any conclusions we're drawing from science are equally undermined.
Yeah, again, I go back to the illustration. You're running to the bedroom to look at the alarm clock in order to justify your belief in what the microwave says. It's the same problem. Nothing's being solved. It's just more. And then he says, what do you say? Something to the effect of, every problem that Hernandez and other apologists pretend exists aren't resolved, even if you appeal to God. One, note, I'm not saying this is a problem. Basically like, okay, God is going to solve it because I don't know. I really don't know where he's going with it, but note that I'm not appealing to God to quote unquote solve the problem. It's an internal critique. And I'm even struggling to try to find like what point he's trying to make here, because let's appeal to God for a second. Well, if God exists, then one, our brains are designed to obtain truth. And I like how Plantinga puts it. It's something like, well, it would make sense that God would create us with cognitive faculties that are going to represent the external world accurately, because there are certain things, there's certain goals, intentions. There's a teleology behind our existence, behind our faculties, behind our brain, et cetera, et cetera. But again, you don't get any of that on naturalism and evolution. So I'm not trying to bring God into the argument. The evolutionary argument has nothing to do with God here. It's, again, an internal critique. The point is simply that given what we know about it, it's not an argument from ignorance. It's an argument that given what we do know, we have reasons to not trust our cognitive faculties. And then he says, he argues, well, that we're saying, well, evolution doesn't give you confidence, doesn't give you reliability. And then he says, I completely disagree. We demonstrably have them. That's a good assertion. Haven't heard an argument for it. He just repeated the assertions he made earlier. So sure, he can be confident that his cognitive faculties are reliable. He can be confident that he can demonstrate it. But again, what would he be using? Beating a dead horse here. You're going to the alarm clock to justify what the microwave time says. You're not solving anything. And just asserting it with confidence, that doesn't help.
Yeah. And the subtle straw manning of our position is also quite frustrating because, you set up the dichotomy in the beginning, God or no God. That's not to just assert that if you magically sprinkle the word God in there, problem solved. Because you and I would both agree that if specifically the exhaustive divine determinism version of Calvinism were true, we
Good
also
point.
wouldn't have reliable
Very good
cognitive
point.
faculties.
That's right.
So even you and I would agree that just inserting God doesn't magically fix the problem.
Yeah.
We would provide additional arguments for a God who creates us with freedom of the will, with the ability
Yeah.
to reason and things like that. So it's also just a
Very good.
straw manning of our position.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect system, and it's up to us to pluck at those threads to find out which ones are most reliable. It is a wise thing now and again to hang a question mark on things you've long taken for granted. That is a quote from
All right,
Bertrand
you
Russell.
can pause there because
And so
actually
in
it
the
was
various
just
threads that
that one sentence I was looking for. He says that we would have to pluck and like look for the beliefs that aren't reliable, or whatever. But the problem remains the same. You're using the source that is already undercut. You're using a brain that we already said can't be trusted. So you brought up the discussion I had with the determinist, the atheist determinist. I use this illustration. Imagine I blindfold you and I put before you a basket of 100 ping pongs. 90 of them are white and 10 of those ping pongs are red, and I blindfold you. Now let's suppose that the red ones are false beliefs and the white ones are true beliefs. With the blindfold on, how would you only pick out the red ones? How would you know? Well, you wouldn't know. Maybe you get lucky and you only pick out the red ones, right? The false beliefs. Great. But there's no way to justify or rationally affirm that you only picked out the red ones. Now, what's funny is that atheist said something like, well, you would have to take off the blindfold. I'm like, right. You would have to step out the system of determinism or remove the undercutting defeater that already has been presented for trusting in the reliability of your brain. But if you can't do that, which you couldn't if you're determined, and you couldn't if there's no God and everything is brought about by evolution and natural selection, naturalism, well, you cannot take off the blindfold. That's the problem. So having a blindfold on and saying, well, look, I picked out 10 ping pong balls and I'm confident they're the red ones, that doesn't solve the issue. That's question begging. You're just making assertions there.
Yeah. Again, like you said, to beat a dead horse, but this is just important. The very mechanisms which you are using to quote unquote pick out the true and false beliefs are equally as determined as the beliefs themselves.
Right.
So it's like if the belief is undermined, then the mechanism you're using to determine if it's a false belief or a true belief is equally undermined. It's just, as Tim Stratton would say, it's like you're experiencing the illusion of reasoning, but you're really just a passive cog in all the deterministic mechanisms going on in your brain.
Yeah. I like to say that if you're determined and all your thoughts and beliefs are determined, then your very belief that your beliefs are rational is equally something you're determined to believe. In other words, you would just have determined beliefs about your determined beliefs, but the problem's still there. It's still determinism. And so we have like three more clips. And I'll tell you what you're going to find. You're going to have another assertion, a confident assertion. Then you're going to have a back to why is God needed, and then a mischaracterization of the argument because you can go back and end with the Superman thing.
Yeah.
Are in fact generally reliable. And the not so hidden argument here is that the apologists know this. We all know it. We all fundamentally understand that our faculties, our senses, our reasoning capabilities, generally speaking, are reliable, have access to truth in some regard, that we're not 100% accurate, but that we can be
Again, it brings up the 100% accurate. No one's arguing certainty. Go watch my discussion or my breakdown of my discussion with Godless Granny, where I talk about certainty is not a requirement for the argument. But note again, it's just a bold assertion. We all know our faculties are reliable, and even apologists know that. Check this out. I'm going to concede this. I agree with him. I do think we all know that our faculties are reliable. I do think that apologists know this. But now consider the argument. If there's no God, given natural selection and evolution, given naturalism, our faculties are not reliable. But our faculties are reliable. Therefore, you cannot rationally affirm natural selection and evolution, naturalism. Like that just concedes the argument. You just conceded the argument. So, yeah, I don't...
It's like he doesn't understand the implication. Like we're arguing or the logical implications of his worldview,
right? And
he just wants to just assert his starting point. Then, like you said, jump to what we would intuitively agree with. Hey, I am reasoning. Hey, I do know how to reason. I do know how to logically deduce. I do know how to recognize if I have a false belief and change my mind. But that undermines his worldview. And he's just not seeing that.
It's similar to the moral argument. Like imagine, someone presents a moral argument. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. And the second premise is objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. Now imagine you just state the first premise. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. But the atheist says, but objective moral values do exist and apologists know they exist. Right, therefore God exists. Right, that's so just affirming that premise in the moral argument doesn't avoid the conclusion. So affirming, but they are reliable, right? That just what's the saying? One man's modus ponens is another man's modus tollens. Basically, if P then Q, if P then Q, P therefore Q, or if you say if P then Q, well not Q, therefore not P. Okay, I said that right, but you get it. Like, okay, if you're just gonna affirm one of it that leads to my conclusion or the conclusion I'm aiming at or want to get to, you haven't defeated the argument. You've just conceded the very point I'm trying to get you to say.
Yeah. Or they accuse you of straw manning, right? Like I see this all the time with Calvinists, right? Like if we point out a logical implication of something they believe, they accuse us of straw manning them and going, but we don't believe that, right? But what you're laying out, like you just said, is if P and Q, hey, you assert P, therefore Q. And what guys like him or what Calvinists want to do is go, well, no, I believe in P, but I don't believe in Q. You don't get to saddle me with Q. You're straw manning me. And your point is just, no, I'm just saying the logical implications of P are Q. So if you reject Q, you have to either reject P or show me where I'm wrong in the reasoning there. It's not a straw man, right? You're just drawing out the logical implications of it.
Yep. And to recap, all we've heard so far, because his only part that he's actually tried to address the argument was, well, if given natural selection during an evolution, naturalism, we have an undercut and defeater for trusting in the reliability of our cognitive faculties. His response, but look how reliable they are.
Right. So clearly, if I just insist that evolution is true, and I know I have reliable cognitive faculties, therefore somehow evolution must have produced those reliable cognitive faculties. Well, give us an argument for it, Matt. Give us an argument. You can't just say it.
And you can't use an argument that begs a question. If you're rational, your cognitive faculties are the thing in question. You cannot point to your cognitive faculties to get out of the problem that your cognitive faculties have an undercut and defeater.
Yeah.
Reasonably confident in the reliability of what we generally produce, so much so that we can identify when someone is failing cognitively to be in touch with reality.
All right, that was an accident, and I continued the clip instead of jumping ahead. But yeah, really similar point there. He's just asserting the conclusion.
In the last two, you can just play it at 28 and just let it go through.
Now I can't even see. Go.
When I'm crossing the street, and I see no reason to think that a God is necessary for the faculties I have, which are both amazing and wonderful and generally reliable, and yet incomplete, broken, and subject to future training as we all continue to hone the networks of truth that we use to navigate our daily lives like billions of other people for all of history. It is a massive repeated trial that you cannot boil down to one incident of, car coming, must move to hide fact I'm Superman. No. See you next time.
Oh, there you go, Eric. You clearly got destroyed with that last statement there.
So here's what's interesting is, again, just an assertion, not an argument, but they are reliable. Look at how it's produced stuff. I mean, imagine if we made a similar argument, and imagine if we said, Matt, throughout human history, human beings have believed in a god or gods. So clearly theism is true because look how far it's gotten us, right? Something being pragmatically useful doesn't mean therefore reliable or true, because obviously he wouldn't accept that same argument if I said, well, look how throughout the history of humanity we believed in theism has been held throughout the history of human beings. Well, therefore what? Would he say therefore theism is true? Would he say therefore theism can be reliable? Or at best, he could say theism could be reliable for producing survival, because people who believe in God tend to survive longer. People who are religious tend to live happier, so to speak. Sure, but none of that proves whether or not it's true or reliable. Yet he does that when it comes to the argument, evolutionary argument against naturalism. So when he says, I don't see why a God is needed. Well, first of all, you haven't shown that you can get this without God, right? That's the point of the argument. It's an internal critique. I'm not saying therefore you need God. That could be added on to the argument. But again, it's an internal critique showing you have an undercutting defeater and you can't escape it by simply pointing to your cognitive faculties when those are the very thing under question. So we can think of it like this. If someone wants to say, okay, look, our cognitive faculties are reliable. Okay, yes, I agree. But let's look at it this way. Given, since he wants to bring in God and theism, given naturalism and evolution on the one hand, and theism on the other hand, what of those two worldviews makes it expected or more reasonable, more probable that our cognitive faculties would be reliable? If we just look at it from that perspective, do we have more reason on naturalism, given natural selection, evolution, to believe that we would have cognitive faculties that are reliable, or is that better expected and more probable on theism? I think the answer is clear. Theism has a clear intent, design, goal, teleology behind it. Naturalism, evolution, natural selection doesn't have a goal, intention, or design behind it. If anything, at best, survival value, that does not guarantee nor necessitate nor require true beliefs for it to produce adaptive behavior and survivability.
Yeah, and I'll say more on that on the Rumble side, with regard to my slight quibbles with the argument. But it's not because I don't think the argument doesn't work. It's sometimes I just think it grants too much. Funny enough. But actually, yeah, now we are going to turn to another video where, as you referenced earlier, where you questioned him on this years ago. And, to the point of the thumbnail, I put in the thumbnail that he concedes the argument. That's not clickbait, right? That's not me just trying to make a rhetorical gotcha. That's literally what you were going to see in this following clip.
Okay. Hey, Matt. Good to see you again.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, good. I'm going to ask a question, then sit down, because that's what you're supposed to do in these things.
And just very briefly, I am back now to normal speed, because if you listen to Eric at 2 times speed, you'll end up going back in time. So,
on Matt's worldview, Matt Slick, his brain was designed to obtain truth. But on your worldview, there was no design. So it sounds like you're essentially saying that I can trust my brain because my brain tells me that I can trust it. So my question is this: how do you escape this viciously circular, self-defeating, begging the question worldview without appealing to your brain? Because even if you say that you can demonstrate it or test it with any brain, then you are still using your brain, and we're back to the same problem.
Sure. Under what you said you can't.
Sorry?
Under how the way you just described it, there is no resolution to that. And my position is that there's no resolution to it under his claim that he can resolve it either.
That wasn't my question. You messed me up. I was going to sit down. No, but my question is, on your own worldview, it's not designed to obtain truth. So how do you escape the circle without using your brain? What else can you use? Is my only question.
Nothing.
yep, there you go. We'll let the rest of this play out.
I'm not claiming that my brain is producing truth or that it is absolutely representing reality accurately. The only thing that I can do is continue taking experiences and evaluate the consequences of my actions as I experience them. You can say, okay,
Yeah, this is what he does. He just prattles.
And people got upset, like, oh, why'd you fast forward it? So I posted the original unedited one.
That matter.
It doesn't add anything valuable.
What am I getting wrong?
How you escape the circular reasoning that I can trust my brain. Because, okay, there, thank you.
Okay.
You can't.
Yeah, Eric, you can. Dummy.
How do you escape this viciously circular,
What you said you can't.
self-defeating,
What you said you
What
can't.
you said you can't.
begging the question worldview?
What you said you can't.
What you said you can't.
Under how the way you just described it, there is no resolution to that.
So yeah, so that was, and gosh, that was like over 10 years ago. So my editing wasn't as fancy or good as it was, and there's even a typo in there. But yeah, so exactly what you said. I mean, he's so unless he's changed his view,
your case.
unless he's changed his view, which it doesn't sound like he has. I mean, when he came out with this video, first of all, I was like, oh, I really don't want to respond. Maybe I should, though. And so I was like, well, I'll have Stellman suffer with me. We can suffer together doing this. But it's like, honestly, I just felt like I could literally just repost that same video as a response to his 30-something minute video, because the answer is the same. I mean, at the end, he's like, you can't boil it down to Superman and having a false belief, which I think is a straw man. Again, the Superman illustration was simply to make the point that false beliefs can also produce adaptive behavior that grants survival value. And again, that video that you just showed, I think it sums it up there. He's already responded to his own video in the past of the video he'd make about me in the future.
Yeah, that's funny. As you just pointed out, the reason God gave us people like Matt Dillahunty is just, to back up his verse of, hey, rejoice in your suffering. So we got to do this together. We got to rejoice. It gives us an opportunity to, educate new people in these arguments.
And I want to say one more thing too. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first.
The reason, and I'm saying, being kind of tongue in cheek, saying it's suffering, although, I've debated him once. I don't necessarily care to debate him again, just because I don't think he brings much to the table. That's not an insult against him. I mean, just as a skeptic, that's kind of, par for the course, right? I mean, most of the time he's going to say, like, I don't know, or I'm not convinced, not take a position and just take pot shots at your position.
Yeah.
And even when sometimes it seems like he avoids taking a position, but again, it's kind of natural for a skeptic to do that, right? Skepticism is not a position. It's more of just being skeptical of every other position. But, and people can go, and I debated Dillahunty. You can go on my YouTube channel and watch my debate. You can watch, I made 3 different clips of my debates with him where it kind of summarized, because as I hope the listener can see, out of a 30-something minute video, there was maybe 2 or 3 minutes total where there was an attempt at an argument, and everything else was nitpicking or a complaint about what I'm doing allegedly or what I'm not doing, a complaint about the illustration or analogy that I use. And then after the 2 to 3 minute, which you could charitably call an argument, it's just repeating the assertions he made in the alleged argument. There's nothing brought to the table. There's nothing really to respond to, because even you're telling me, like, it's kind of hard to find, timestamps. So I just found, like, at least little clips here and there. But you saw, like you were saying, we jump all over the place because it's like there's not one coherent argument that you can state into a syllogism. At best, if I were to be charitable, try to still man, I guess the syllogism can be the EAAN argues that given natural selection, evolution, naturalism, our cognitive faculties aren't reliable. Premise 2, but our cognitive faculties are reliable. I don't really know how to finish this syllogism. Therefore, the EAAN is false. But one, right, you have to argue for that, right? And again, I'm trying to be charitable still, man. That syllogism could be valid. Whether or not it sounds a different question, but then you'd have to defend the premises. And it's not just that our faculties are reliable. It's our faculties are or can be or are expected to be reliable under naturalism and evolution. That's where the argument needs to be made. You can't just assert, well, they are reliable and assume naturalism and evolution are true, and therefore you kind of they come hand in hand. No, you have to argue for both. You have to argue that under that story of how we came about, naturalism, evolution, we would expect, or we do have reason to believe they're reliable. And you can't just say my faculties are reliable because my faculties tell me they're reliable, when that's the very thing in question. And if they are reliable and the evolutionary argument against naturalism is a valid, sound argument, well, then now, again, you just have a modus tollens where you're saying, well, similar with the morality. If there's no God, there's no objective morality. But there is objective morality. Okay, well, then, therefore, God exists.
Yeah, exactly. So we are going to head over to Rumble now. We're going to discuss a few more things on here. I'm going to give my problems with the argument. We're going to discuss a bit of rhetoric and the way you've approached debates and the way I'm encouraging Christians to go out and evangelize. Get the book, The Lazy Approach to Evangelism. Great book. Subscribe to Eric's channel. Hey, subscribe to this channel. Might help catch me up to Eric's following. That would be much appreciated. And if you are watching this after fact, leave a comment. That's one of the best things you can do for the algorithm to help it get it out to more people. Before we head over there, Eric, anything else you're working on that people should be looking out for?
I I mean, nothing in particular right now. I mean, there's some kind of things on the back burner, some things in the works, but nothing like immediately coming out necessarily. Just some travel got going on, and some things I'm doing. And in the ministry I work with, Maven, they're actually going to be adapting and using my book for the training that happens for one of the apologetic mission trips. So I'm helping them redo their the guidebook they use for the students. It's a pretty thick. I mean, I'm only having to do a section or so, but yeah, it's a pretty thick thing for the apologetics trainings that they have and what they do throughout the week. So that's kind of something. That's not something that's going to be like published, so to speak. It's going to be for these Maven trip and trainings. But yeah, people can go to EHM Apologetics. You can see all my speaking engagements, what's coming up, and what I'm doing, and they can keep up with me there.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you guys want to see the rest of this video that we're doing today live, go right. It's the link in the description. You will be connected right to Rumble, so you do not lose it. We are going to close out on the YouTube front here. And again, just as God uses Matt Dillahunty to allow us to rejoice through our suffering, he also uses Matt Dillahunty for another very important reason, and that is to remind us
atheism is retarded.
So yeah, goodbye, YouTube. See you guys over on Rumble. And until next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we're the Unapologetic Apologists.